as they log on. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mitch Menchaca. I'm the director of the City of Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture, and I want to welcome you to today's online workshop with Bill Dambrova. I'm really excited about this personally as a graphic design minor in 1999. So things have definitely shifted and changed since then, and it's really important for artists to be able to be up to speed on technologies around Photoshop and all that good stuff, especially presenting your artwork to entities like the City of Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture Public Art Program. So if you're new to the field or an artist making the leap from studio artist to public art or just wanting to sharpen up skills, we're really excited to have you. And so I will turn it over to Ed Lebo, our public art director, who is calling in this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mitch, and thanks everybody for joining us. This is the 5th in the series of online workshops. If you happen to miss all the 4 that occurred in August, they were the Public Art 101s. They are up online at phoenix.gov/arts and follow the link to the workshops. They'll be there for your permanent resources going forward. As Mitch said, this is going to be a great workshop today, so I'll keep the intro short. We are delighted to have Bill Dambrova involved in this. Bill has just recently finished designing one of the terrazzo floors for, in this case, the rental car center SkyTrain station. It is a beautiful floor. He has vast knowledge in how to make the transition from two-dimensional designs on paper into two-dimensional designs and digital files that are used by a wide range of manufacturing entities to carry out works digitally. He's a native Arizonan, an ASU graduate with a BA in studio art. He has also done, in addition to his own painting in studios, he's done a wide range of works, installation works for Burning Man, East Jesus, and Meow Wolf. And his work is in a wide range of public collections as well throughout this state. He's a relatively new to public art, but as I said, when you see his terrazzo floor at SkyTrain sometime in 2021, it is really a gem. He's also a museum exhibits designer, so he's done a wide range of museum design for Los Angeles Zoo, Natural History Museum of LA County, Navajo Nation Museum, the New York Botanical Garden, and on and on and on. So without further ado, I wanted to turn it over to Barry Sparkman, who is one of our project managers. And Barry managed the project that Bill worked on at the SkyTrain. And just sort of some housekeeping, Doug Oland, if you wave your hands out there, he's our collections manager. He will be checking all the chat box questions that you have. So if you have questions along the way, just type them into the chat box. We'll gather those at the end of the presentation and answer them as best we can. Also, Elizabeth Grajales, if you're out there, wave your phone if you can. She's our senior project manager, and we're delighted to have her on as well. So with all of that, thank you so much for joining us. And Barry, take it away.
I want to echo Ed's welcome. Thanks for joining us this Thursday morning. We're very excited about this workshop. If you would keep yourself muted through Bill's presentation, it'll minimize the feedback. And if you're having any technical problems along the way, you can chat in the box, and Doug will help you try to get back on track. Everyone here, are there any issues before we get started? I see none, so Bill, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Warm welcome. As everyone said, thanks for being here on a Thursday morning. Want to thank everybody at City of Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture for allowing me to share with you some of the stuff that I've learned about how to use Photoshop over the years. I basically taught myself how to use Photoshop back also in the early 90s. Things have changed since the early 90s. Before, you used to have to get a book to go with your program, and you'd have to read about how to use it and how to learn what to do with it. Now you can go online and find millions of tutorials and YouTube tutorials and things like that. So Even though you could have just done that to learn some of the things I'm going to show you today, I'm really focusing and gearing towards what I did to, upload images to the public art website and, what I did to create the design for the public art project that I just finished. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, screen. Let me know if it shares. There we go. My biggest challenge is working around the little thumbnail of WebEx. So I'm going to try to get that hidden. So if for some reason I start to go on and on, Barry, can you guys just text me or something so that I can stop talking?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So I've got this I do have a lot of information to share. So I've got like notes and things like that just to keep me on track. I'm going to be moving at a pretty decent pace to try to fit everything I want to show you into the 40 minutes or so that I have to make time for questions. Just remember, this will be recorded. You can go back and take notes from the recorded version later. It's going to be on the City of Phoenix Arts and Culture website, and they have a YouTube channel. So you don't really need to take notes. I would just sit back with your coffee and absorb what I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to go through this little really quick PowerPoint. Okay, so my main goal with this workshop is to tailor my demonstrations to help you understand how to manipulate your digital files to make them look as close to the original artwork as possible to meet the requirements for uploading files of your artwork for artist calls and requests for qualifications. As I said, there's a lot of tutorials online. Is somebody trying to talk, or is that just somebody's not muted? Everything cool?
Yeah, somebody's not muted, so it's feedback.
Okay, cool. So I just want to direct you to the Photoshop website. It's a simple link when you go to if you rewatch this on the recorded version, we'll put the link up for you. But it's adobe.com, and then you can find the tutorials. These tutorials are great. Just as I said, they're dedicating 17 minutes just to how to change the image size, 20 minutes to work with layers. I'm going to talk about all this stuff in less than 40 minutes, just to give you an idea of what we're going to go through. I want to make sure you guys really get a bang for your buck on this one. Let's see. I'm going to show you how I convert the digital file taken from a professional photographer into the correct file format and size requirements for applying for artist calls. Just want to show you in this photo, Sean here is actually sitting in front of my painting, doing the retouching and the editing of my image so that he really gets all the colors correct. That's not always the case. After that, I'm going to show you a second kind of what I'm just calling a worst case scenario, because really, if you can, if you have the means, please have your work shot by a professional photographer, because applying for public art projects, your photos are really, in my opinion, the most important thing about your submission. You don't want to have really blurry photos. I'm showing you paintings, but there's also, there's artists that are going to be showing images of their sculptures and things like that too. And if you can get a professional to take those photos, you really can't go wrong. But in a pinch, and I've done this before, I can basically convert a digital photograph taken from my phone camera with really not great lighting and use all the Photoshop options to retouch my photo. And this basically just gives me a chance to show you guys how I do that. The second thing I'll do is to show you how I use Photoshop to cut or clip a design, in this case my floor, and put it into another window, in this case the architect's rendering of the rental car return station where my floor is actually currently being fabricated. I want to talk a little bit about these files and stuff too. So photographers usually give you a folder with different file types and a range of file sizes for each image, from large file sizes to use for print and smaller file sizes to use for uploading to the web. There are occasions when you get files from a photographer and the colors might be off because maybe they shot your work in your studio and they went home and did the editing at home. But I can show you how this image on the left is spot on to how the actual image, the painting looks, because they scanned it and they had the painting with them. But say you get something as drastic as this, I can show you how to take something as drastic as this and turn it back into what it's supposed to look like. You often hear files described as either raster or vector. I'll talk more about the difference in my Illustrator workshop next week. Raster images are what we're working with today. They use tiny dots or pixels to make up images with subtle chromatic gradations. Vector files are made up of geometry, like lines and curves. Everything is sharp-edged and can't be pixelated unless you save it as a JPEG or other raster format. When you zoom way in or way out, the line quality remains sharp and doesn't pixelate. I can show you really quickly. I thought I had this open. I'm going to open Illustrator really quick so I can show you a raster file. So this is a drawing that I did, and I wanted to have it screen printed on shirts. And to do that, you really want your edges to be as crisp as possible and not blurry. So I'm zooming way in, and you can see that the more I just can zoom all the way in, and this edge doesn't change. It doesn't become blurry. It stays sharp. Okay. All right. So when you get your workshop by a professional photographer, it's ideal. Sometimes they'll give you a TIFF file, which I really love when they do that, because TIFF files are what's known as a lossless format. When you save files in this format, it ensures that the image will produce and maintain the highest quality for future use. TIFF images are really difficult to alter, making them ideal for protecting information and archiving. What you get from your phone, and what the Arts and Culture's website that you upload your files to, Cafe, they request a JPEG. The reason they request JPEGs is because they're compressed versions of files, and that doesn't take a lot of space on your computer. You can send them through emails, you can upload them easily and not blow up someone else's storage on their computers. JPEGs are what's known as a lossy format, meaning that it's easy to lose information. There are more losses every time you save a JPEG. One thing to remember is you cannot save a JPEG as a higher resolution than it was to begin with. So if you have a really small file that's pixelated and blurry, you can't res it up, is what they say, and because it'll just make it more blurry. When you take a high-res file and compress it into a smaller file, you increase the size of the little dots, so you can use less dots overall, which is what makes the file smaller. And it also means less information, so that's what makes it blurry or pixelated. So the example I'm showing you here is an image that looks okay on your screen, but say it's a really small image file, and you think, well, I can just plug in the numbers and make it bigger. And what happens is you get a really blurry image because it's using less dots, but they're bigger dots to try to convey all that information. Every time I've applied for a call with different organizations, the criteria for file size and even image or pixel size is different. I have to resize my photos nearly every time I apply. So even if you have your photos shot by a professional, they're going to give you files, but they may not be set up to the correct size or criteria that the artist, that the organization called to artists are asking for. So this is exactly what the Cafe Arts called to art or upload page looks like. I just want to call your attention to the fact that I'm using a Mac. I know that the command on a Mac is the control key on Windows. Option on a Mac is the alt key on Windows. I'm going to be using these two shortcut commands most often during my presentation. And if I can remember what the what Mac translates into Windows is as I'm talking about what I'm doing in Photoshop, I'll try to call it out. But if I don't, that's just one of those things that you can find out using one of the tutorials. I'm going to X out of that and start right away talking about files again. As you can see here, this is I've got this Cafe call to art requirements up here so that we can compare what's happening here with what's happening in the actual file. So if you're lucky, the photographer will give you a folder with a TIFF file and a folder full of JPEGs. These JPEGs may or may not meet these criteria. I'm just going to show you how to convert this TIFF file into a JPEG and save it under 5 megabytes. So on a Mac, you can left click with the mouse and go to Get Info, and it will tell you how big the file is. So this is a 105.3 megabyte file, and we want to get it down to 5 megabytes as a JPEG. On Windows, I think it's right click, drop down, and go to Properties, and it'll tell you this file size. Okay, so Right away, there's several different ways to open a file in Photoshop. You can click on Photoshop, go to create new. Also, I'm using Photoshop 2020, but most of the stuff I'm going to tell you, you should be able to use on CS6 or CS4. You can open a file from scratch and plug in all the numbers. In this case, I know my file is a certain size and I want to open it to the largest size possible. So the other way to open it is to go to File, Open, and then find the folder that the file's in. Here it is. Click on it and hit Open. Opens it up. Right away, I just want to show you, hopefully you'll be able to see this on your screens, the resolution of this file, this 105 megabyte file. What I did was grab the zoom tool, and I'm clicking and dragging with my left mouse button to zoom way in. And you can see that it's so detailed that you can see the individual weave of the canvas before it starts to turn into those pixels that I talked about earlier. So you can zoom way in on this, and this file is set up to be able to use to make prints from, to blow it up gigantic on the side of a building. You know, you can make, you can take these and put them in catalogs and have really high resolution images in your catalog, which is great, but we need to change this into a JPEG. Another thing that you can do with Photoshop to find out how close your file is to these, this criteria is go down to the lower left corner of Photoshop window and left click and hold on it, and it will show you the width in pixels, the channel, which is what they're calling the mode that we're in, RGB color, and then the resolution. So for Cafe, they want it to be a JPEG. They want the file dimensions to be 1200 pixels or greater on a side. You go down here and click the little lower left corner. We are at 6,738 pixels on a side, so we're way above this 1,200 pixels. So first thing we want to do is get it down to under 5 megabytes. Super easy. Go to File, left click, drop down and Save As. I want to keep my main file that I got from the photographer as a master file, so every time I save from that file, I save as onto my desktop just to get it out of that folder, make sure that I don't accidentally save over my master. You have a drop down that shows you where to save it, to the desktop, and then a drop down just to save it as a JPEG. And it's that simple. Converting a TIFF into a JPEG is just by changing this on the drop down. Go to Save, and then automatically it brings up a JPEG option box. And you can see here that just by saving it as a JPEG, we've dropped from 100 and something megabytes to 26.8 megabytes as the file size. Okay, file size and image size are two different things. Keep that in mind. So we're still at 26.8 megabytes. We want to get under 5. Again, really simple. I wouldn't think it would be this easy, but you just can use this slider here to slide down to make it lower file, or a smaller file size. So we need it to be under 5 megabytes. We're right at 5 megabytes here. I'm just going to go slide it down a little bit lower. We're at 4.9 megabytes. Hit OK. And then there's a way to double check that. Now I've saved it here on my desktop. I'm going to do the right mouse click, get info, and we're at 5 megabytes, which is exactly what we wanted. I'm just going to check in. Barry, how are we doing? Thumbs up? Everything okay? All right, cool. So now we've met the criteria that we're looking for the Cafe Arts page. Let me just show you what happens when we zoom in. I'm using the zoom tool to zoom in. It still is really a great resolution. It does, you start to see the pixels just a little sooner, but not very much sooner. So we've got this really great high resolution file, and it's still only 5 megabytes. So just to demonstrate what can happen with your JPEGs when you're saving these files, and if you save them too small, what happens to them, etc. And then you try to res it up, I'll give you a quick demonstration of that. But let's say that the requirements for a different organization want this file dimension to be less than 1200 pixels or greater on a side. The way that we do that is go to Image, and then Image Size, And all that information is here. So it lets you see the image size in pixels. You can change that to inches. So it's 17 by 22 inches, and give you a frame of reference in your mind how big that would be at 300 DPI or pixels per inch. 300 is great for print. Resolution is really mostly important when you're working with print, but in this case, we're really just moving images from one computer to another. So resolution's not super important. It does affect image size, which can change the file size, but so long as you have 100 100 pixels per inch resolution at say like 5 inches on the longest side, you should be good for uploading in most cases. One thing I want to point out is image size here says 100 megabytes. So we saved it at 5 megabytes. Why does it say 100 megabytes here? Because this is talking about image size, not file size. Something I want to point out, they're saying file dimensions, 1200 pixels. File dimensions technically doesn't really make sense. What they're asking for is image size. So image size here doesn't affect file size. File size has to do with how you saved it. Okay, so what I want to show now is what happens if we change this to be lower than 1200 pixels on a side. So I'm going to change this to pixels. Right here is where you can just change the number to the number that you want. I want to point out here that this little link button links these two numbers to make the change proportional. So when you change one number, it changes the whole thing to stay in proportion. So if I was to unclick that and type in 1200, you end up getting a distorted image in this preview box here. So by clicking, link them together, make sure this is clicked, then you can do 1200, and now it's 1200 by 925 pixels. Resolution is still at 300. It drastically changed the image size because we drastically changed the image size here. And then what I actually want to show you is what happens if you have a really small file. So I'm going to change the resolution down to even below 72, which is what you end up getting from a camera. I'm going to change it to 50 and then save it. And it, for some reason, sends it way back in space there. This happens sometimes. One way to get it back onto your screen to fit the screen is to hit the command key and then 0, and it'll bring it directly back into your screen there. And you can see how pixelated it is already. So if I use the zoom tool and zoom in, you can see that we're already getting those pixels right away. So now we're just going to pretend this file is your highest resolution file that you have, and you know, New Times calls you and they want you to send them a photo to be on their website or in their magazine, and this is all you have, and you think, well, I can just take this and res it up to be the size that it needs to be by just going here and making the resolution crazy high, like 600, and then, you know, making the pixel size crazy high again to where it should be, and then hitting OK. What you end up with is this really blurry image because, again, it's made up of individual pixels, and those pixels are now giant pixels trying to explain a bunch of information, as opposed to being a lot of tiny little pixels explaining all that information. So that is a quick tutorial on file size and all that kind of thing with an image that you got from a photographer. Now I'm going to show you what I was calling the worst case scenario, which it's not really that bad of a scenario if you have the means, if you have your own like really nice high resolution camera or something and can shoot it on a tripod, you know, and learn how to do it. That's also one way to do it. But I'm going to show you, again, this is another way. I'm not sure if I mentioned this way before, but my favorite way to open a file on a Mac is just to grab it, left click it with the mouse and drag it down into Photoshop. And you have an image here that I took in my studio. So when I shoot my own work, I wait for a cloudy day, take it outside, get my good camera, set it on a tripod, got pretty diffused lighting out there, and then I shoot it on the highest resolution possible, and then I come into Photoshop and edit it because I'm not a really great photographer. But in this case, it wasn't a cloudy day, and I had my phone, which is a 12 megapixel camera, and you know, the lighting is really weird. There's fluorescent lighting, there's incandescent lighting. And when I took pictures with my good camera, not really being a great photographer, I got worse color with my good camera than I got with my phone. So I ended up walking around the studio with my painting, looking for the most even lighting that I could find in the space. And to do that, I ended up having to set it on the floor, kick out the bottom a little bit so that the light could shine onto the bottom. It's still a little washed out at the top, but that's good for our purposes because I can show you how to change that. And then if you notice here, it's a little skewed because I kind of took the photo with my camera at an angle. It's not on a tripod or anything. Sometimes people will just take a photo like this and think they can just crop it using the crop tool, which is here. Really easy to use. Left click and then you try to crop it in or whatever. But look at all that information I'm losing of my painting. They're trying to, and you're not seeing the border or anything like that. So I'm going to escape out of that, and we're not going to do it that way. What I'm going to do is show you using layers how to cut this image out of this photo and place it into another photo. Even if I'm only working in one layer, I want to make sure my layers dialog box is open. Say if you open Photoshop and it's not there, you can find that in many other boxes by going to a window and then layers. This is where you'll find different things like where the color swatches are and things like that. But I want to have my layers box open always and not nested into my window because I'm using a laptop and I want to make sure I have plenty of room to see what's going on my screen here. So one way to cut this thing out is to use the lasso tool. There's different types of lasso tools. If you right click over the toolbar where the lasso tools are, you'll see there's one that's a freeform tool and you can just basically draw with it. I'm holding down the left mouse, and then when I get to the end I release the left mouse, and then it's selected because you get what they call the whoops, trying to zoom in here, the marching ants, these little guys, they call them marching ants to know that you're selected. So that's one of the lasso tools. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect that, and then show you this other one really quickly. The magnetic lasso tool is supposed to basically stick to what you're selecting. It I think it picks the color, and it doesn't always stay on there. I don't know if you can see that, but it's not really staying where I'd like it to stay. It works in some cases, but it's not my favorite lasso tool. My favorite lasso tool is the polygonal lasso tool because I can just click straight lines with it. So I want to cut this out. I'm going to go to the corner here, and just going to go a little bit outside the corner to make sure I get the whole painting. Do a left click and release, and you can move the mouse around and just have access to this line. So again, just to make sure I got the whole painting, I'm just going to click outside a little bit, click and release. And what I'm doing to zoom, this is a Mac feature. I'm holding Control down and then using the little wheel on my mouse to zoom in to show you guys what I'm doing. And then another way to do that, to zoom in Photoshop, if I was to let go of this tool and grab the zoom tool, it would deselect everything I've already selected and start over. So if I want to go down here to this bottom corner, I can use a shortcut, Command plus will zoom me into where my tool's at. So I'm just tapping the plus key every time, and then I can click again and release, and now I've let go of the mouse, zoom back out by hitting Command 0. For some reason it's not doing it. Well, it's not doing it, so I'm gonna do Command minus to get out of there. Moving a little quicker so we can keep the pace going. When I want to complete the circle with my polygonal lasso, when I get close to the end there, you get a little circle saying you're about to complete it. Do one click to complete it, and you get the marching ants. Okay, the reason it wasn't zooming out is because I was zooming in with the Mac, not with the Photoshop. So now we've got it all ready to cut out. It's all selected, ready to cut out. The way that I cut it out is to go to Command X, and I've just cut it out. It shows you a little thumbnail in your layers, what happened. To create a new window in the proportion of what I just cut out, all you have to do is go to Command N for Command New, and it brings up a new window dialog box. And it's actually in the proportions. 28 by 53 is actually really close to the real size of my painting. But to make this file easy to manage, I went over and measured my actual painting to make sure I get the right proportions. And I cut those measurements in half so that I'm not working with a gigantic 28 by 53 inch artboard on my in Photoshop. So I even, like, just to remember, I put the size of what I want to put in here into my file when I created the file. So I'm going to change this to 14. I just double click with my left mouse to get in that box, double click. It's 26.33. And resolution, usually everything starts out at 72 for some reason. I'm just going to be safe and say 100. So I usually don't work with anything more than 300 resolution or anything less than 72 for some reason. It just seems, in all my experience, those are the numbers I just tend to work with. Shows you the color mode that we're in, RGB color. We know we want that for uploading. And then click create, and it's given me this what's called the canvas or artboard on Illustrator, whatever you want to call it. I basically call it the artboard. And if you look over at my layers box, it shows it as a background. Okay, so when I want to paste the image I just cut from this window into this one, now that I've got it, on the as copied, I just have to use Command V, and it copies it in. To back out of it to see how to be able to get a hold of it, to size it into my artboard. I had to zoom out a little bit. These things are called transform controls or control handles. Sometimes it's not selected, and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to move this? I can't see the transform handles. Just go up here and make sure that's clicked. And you'll notice in layers now I have 2 layers because I dropped a new image into this window that's got the background layer and my painting layer. I want to use the move tool to bring my whole painting into the canvas area. So I'm going to hover my tool over one of these little handles there, and then you'll see a icon that shows that you're increasing or decreasing the size by left clicking the mouse and dragging it back and forth on your desk there with your mouse. I'll zoom back out. Okay, and then you can use that to grab the image and move it as well. And then when I get it to kind of where I want, I'm going to hit return to place it there. Right now, this gives me a chance to show you a little bit about layers. So direct your attention over here to the layers area. We're currently in the top layer. You can tell because it's highlighted a different color. If I wanted to go into the background layer, I left click and highlight the background layer, which says it's currently locked. You can just lock or unlock it so that you can't manipulate that layer by clicking the little lock button there. And now you see that I've got the little control handles. And if I turn off the top layer, which is this little, it's turning it off so that you can't see it. It still exists, but it's just not visible. Then you can just see the bottom layer, okay? And then you can, because I'm in that layer, you can manipulate this layer around. But to turn back on your layers, all you do is click that box again, and you can see the top layer. And to work inside that top layer, you need to click in it. There's ways to get rid of layers. I really don't need that bottom layer. And again, easy way to think about layers is if you just have a stack of paper, and the bottom piece of paper on that stack is that white layer that I'm working with, and then the next piece of paper in the stack is the painting. You can add layers by clicking this little plus box here, and you can see that it's just adding layers on top of layers. To get rid of the layers, you can left click and you see the little hand turns into a grabby hand and you can drop it down into the trash can. You can select multiple layers by holding down Shift, and you highlight a couple layers and you can just left click and drag into the trash can. I'm going to also get rid of the bottom layer that I don't need. If you want to make a copy of this layer exactly how it is, which I like to do, so that I don't mess up my original image that I dropped in, is to click and hold and drag it down into the plus sign. Now we've got two identical layers of the painting. But first, I want to show you how to flatten the image. Go to the zoom tool, zoom in, and go to the move. They call it the move tool or selection layer tool, and hover over this handle. If you just hover over the handle as is, you get those icons. This one is a rotate icon, so you can left click and hold and rotate it. If you hold Shift, it'll rotate it in, rotate it in increments. Don't know why it's not doing that. There we go. It's rotating it in, did it before. It rotates it in increments, but it's not doing it now. What we want to do is move this so that it flattens it out. But you can also use this command, which is to hold Command down. It turns your arrow into a little white arrow, and you can move just one of the corners. What's great about this is that you can hold Command, left mouse, and then move it, and then say we wanted to put it on a wall that's going down a hallway and we wanted to make it look like it's in perspective. That's how you can do that. Hit escape just to go back to where I was before, and time is of the essence, so I'm going to go to the move tool, hit Command to get my little white arrow, and then put my corner directly, the corner of my painting directly into the corner of the canvas area. And I would, if I was doing this for real, I would be zoomed way in and make sure that everything is exactly perfect. But this will give you the idea of what you're supposed to do. I hit enter every time just to make sure it's locked in, so when I'm moving this handle, it doesn't start moving the other corners. Okay, and now I'm going to go back to Command 0 to look at the thing. I like it. So what I want to do is save a layer so that, and lock it by clicking the little lock button there, so that if I go into this top layer and start messing around with color and stuff, and I mess it up, I always have my original that's already been flattened out, so I don't have to redo that all the way from the beginning. One thing I want to show you, if you go to Image and Canvas Size, which was that, the background, the white background area, and click it. Say you wanted to upload this image to Instagram, but they want a square format. Basically, look at your size here. Mine's 14 by 28. So if I want to make this a 28 or 26, excuse me, by 26 square, just go to 26.33, hit OK, and now it's made it square format. You can either add a layer and go down here to your color swatches, and you can toggle back and forth by clicking this. Now I'm in a white layer, and then you can use this paint bucket tool. And if you notice, I'm just in this background layer. I can click back there and it creates a white background for you. Okay, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to just X out of that, get rid of that layer. And then, again, just to show you how the crop tool works, if I just wanted to go back, I can use the crop tool and go, it'll actually snap back to my edge. Pretty good there. It's close. And then hit enter. Got the painting back. Actually, this is kind of what you don't want. You don't want to be able to see the background there. But again, I was moving really quick to show you guys how to do this, so you can adjust the corners however you want. All right, so now I'm happy with this, and I want to save it. So one way to do it is go to File, Save or Save As. If you do save as, it means that you can create a new file name for it and it'll save it as another file. I just want to save it because I haven't saved it yet. I'll call it painting 1. And then if you notice, you have the little end tag here as PSD. That means it's going to save it as a Photoshop file, which means it's going to save all these layers that you've used. So I actually want to do that. I'm not going to save it as a JPEG yet. Say save. Painting 1 already exists because I must have hit save somewhere early on. I want to replace it to make sure that I'm oversaving it. And then just want to call your attention to the size of this file as a Photoshop file by going to get info. It says it's 34 megabytes. And I started with a 4 megabyte file from my camera. So Photoshop files can generally be much larger than JPEGs. Okay, so again, Barry, we good? Checking in wise? All right, cool. So now we've got our file or our image all flattened out. But as you remember, I took it in my studio, and so it's a little washed out at the top. The color's a little bit off. There's a few ways to change color. I want to make sure I'm in the layer I want to work in. You can go down here to adjustment layer, create a new adjustment layer, which lets you change things and retouch the image by changing brightness, contrast, exposure, hue, saturation, etc. I'll just show brightness and contrast just as an example. Brings up another little box with sliders, and say you want to add to the brightness and wash it out like crazy, or you want to change the contrast. Just want to go really extreme so you can see what's happening here. Now it's just we're only changing that stuff in a separate layer, not in your original painting layer that has the painting in it. You can turn that on and off, and you're not affecting this image at all. That's one way to do it. I don't like to do it that way because you end up with 1,000 of these adjustment layers and it gets complicated, and I don't really have that much adjusting to do. So I'm going to throw this away, turn that off, make sure I'm in the correct layer that I want to start adjusting. And there's all your retouch tools and stuff are here in adjustments. Go to image adjustments, and all those same drop down tools that were in the adjustment layer that I just showed you are here. Just for time wise, my favorite way to adjust color and stuff is curves. Brings up a dialog box, a curves dialog box. Sometimes when you see photographers shooting work, they end up putting a little card down at the bottom that has a bunch of different colors, all the CMYK colors and black and white and stuff. If you were to do that when you took this photo and you left it in the frame, there's this kind of a quick way to adjust color, which is to go to one of these droppers and click on that little black swatch that's left in the image. I picked this painting because it has black in it and white in it. I know this is a really deep black, so I can just click onto this black and it adjusts. It adjusts for me. Or maybe you may not be able to see that difference because, again, my phone is really good, so it took a really decent colored photo. So I'm going to hit Command Z and back out of that. And show you what happens when I use the white on white. So it brightened it up quite a bit. I don't really like that look. So again, Command Z to get out of that. The way that I like to adjust the image color, you can adjust color and depth and all kinds of things with just this curve line. So you take your cursor, hold it over the curve line, and you can start bending that line and adjusting it in different ways. So if it was me, I'd probably just go to around here and leave it because I'm looking at the painting and that looks pretty close to the saturation level, depth, and everything. But again, once you know where all these buttons are, I just encourage you to practice and go mess around with stuff and see what it does. So I've left the curve here. I can click on this curve again and then start moving it around and really drastically changing the colors using this thing. So you can do it to make weird flyers and psychedelic stuff or whatever you want. So I don't like the way this looks. I'm going to cancel out of it. There's another way to do it that's kind of quick and dirty, which doesn't always work, but you can go to Image, Auto Tone, Auto Contrast, Auto Color. Not going to see much of a change when I hit auto color there, just because it's really close to the actual colors. My favorite, the way I was happiest with it was just by clicking this black area and clicking OK. And now this layer is pretty much stuck with that change. So if I turn that off, you can see a slight difference. Even, yeah, I'm going to leave this off anyway. So now I've got the color to about where I want it to, but it's in terms of light and dark, it's still lighter up here at the top. There's different ways to do this using masks and using channels and things like that. But one way that I like to do it that feels to me like painting is to use the dodge and burn tools. They're over here. The dodge tool, you can adjust the size of the brush by going up here and changing the slider. Dodge tool basically makes things lighter, for lack of a better explanation. You can see it washing out as I'm holding the left mouse key down and just going over it. I don't like that, so I'm going to Command Z out of that. The burn tool is what I want to use to adjust the lighting here. So I'm going to make my tool kind of large because I want to, and it's also fuzzy. You can do a hard edge and a fuzzy brush. I want fuzzy because I just kind of want to make it seem like I'm doing a glaze over this. And you have options to burn in highlights, midtones, and shadows, and then you can change the exposure. So I'll show you what happens when I'm in midtones and I have the exposure all the way up to 100. I'm holding the mouse. You can see that it's basically making it look richer and burning in some of those midtones. I'm going to Z out of that, Command Z out of that, and then change the exposure down to around 20 because I want to just do a wash, like a light wash over the areas. So I like to start with shadows and just deepen the shadows first. For some reason, it's giving me this huge brush. This is better. So left mouse, click and hold, and then you can release and just kind of paint the area. And it's being really subtle because I only have it down at 20. But to show you guys, this is now starting to match the richness that's happening at the bottom. And again, I would spend a lot more time trying to make this even if I had the time, but just to show you how these tools work, that does in a pinch. So now let's say I like what I have here. I'm going to hit save, and it's saving only as a Photoshop file. I want to make sure that we have the same criteria to upload to Cafe. So I can go down here again. I'm just going to switch to the move tool so it's easier. Go down here again and you can see that it is 2,633 pixels on its longest side, which meets the criteria of above 1,200 pixels. Channel, it's RGB. Resolution is 100. And again, it might say 100 resolution, but you can always just check by zooming in. I mean, we don't have the same level of detail as the image shot by a professional with a huge megapixel camera, but you can see as I'm zooming in that there still is quite a bit of detail. I mean, you can see that this is like a impasto part of the painting that you can see a splotch there. So I'm going to hit Command 0 to zoom back out of there. So I'm happy with this. Go to, make sure I'm in Photoshop, go to File, Save As, and then this time it's already titled what I want to title it. Go to Photoshop, the drop down here, and save it as a JPEG. Make sure it's being saved to my desktop. Hit save. Again, sometimes it'll put the slider where it was before, and if I don't want it to be as low as 464 kilobytes, I can raise the slider. This doesn't affect anything. It's not going to affect resolution by raising the slider like I was talking about, taking a file and raising the resolution or anything before. This is just perfectly fine. And now it's saying that the file is going to be about 2.4 megabytes, which is under the 5 megabyte range. And remember, we started with just a 3.7 or 4 megabyte file from my phone anyway. So by saving it to my desktop, I have it here. I can left click, check get info, and it's just want to double check that it's 2.6 megabytes so that I know I'll be able to upload it okay. All right, so in a pinch, that's where you find all those buttons. Again, like I said, if I was moving too fast for you, I would come back and check the recording and just kind of see where I'm navigating to. Like a lot of the stuff I'm doing is in image, and that's where you find mode, all the adjustment layer stuff, canvas size, and all that. So just for these purposes, you don't really have to worry about much more than just what's in image and where to find your layers box. Okay, so checking in, Barry, how are we doing? How much time do you think I have to show the next bit? You're on mute. I can't hear you. All right, I'm just going to keep going. Can I just keep going?
Sure.
About 6 minutes till 11, and then we don't have a whole lot of questions yet. So go ahead and keep on keeping on.
All right, so I'm just going to go for it and just go till you guys tell me to stop. So Barry, just text me when I need to stop.
Perfect.
All right, cool. All right, so the next thing I want to show you guys is how to take an architect's rendering, and I'm just going to drop it into Photoshop. So this is the architect's rendering of the rental car return station. And I want to lay my floor in there. Basically, I'm going to use most of the same tools I use to flatten out that image for uploading. And I want to make sure my layers box is on, my show transform controls is on. In this case, I think this looks a little dark and I want to brighten it up a little bit. So I want to make sure I'm in the correct layer, and then I can manipulate it. Go to image, adjustments, brightness, contrast, and then increase the brightness. Sometimes it washes out. I don't want that, but just get it to around there because make it look a little sunnier in there, and hit OK. I want to bring my floor into Photoshop. Just dragging it in. Here's my floor design. Going back to the first window, I know that I'm only about 3/4 of the way into the floor, so I don't really need to bring in the whole image of my floor. So I'm going to go to the crop tool. First, I want to make sure I unclick the lock, get my my handles there, and then click crop, and then just crop it to about where I think I want to end, which is right about there. Hit enter or return, and then a way to move this image into this other tab, you can just hold down the left mouse and then drag the tab away from the main Photoshop window. And now I can go to my move tool and just like left click and hold and drag that right into the next window. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom out so you can see where the other file is. And then if you look at layers, I'm on this layer I just dropped in is on the top of the other layer. And by using rotate that I showed you before, hovering over one of the handles, I'm just going to start moving it. And because we're running low on time, this is going to become more of like a demonstration than a tutorial. Once I start moving it, I don't want to hit enter because it's just going to turn into a box that's harder to manipulate. Okay. So I want to do that, use that zoom technique I told you before, where I zoom in using the command and the plus and minus key. So I'm going to put the front entrance close to where it needs to go by using command and then the tool key and holding down the mouse button, and just to start putting things in perspective here. And to make things easier, I'm going to do command plus to get in there. And then if I want to see where I'm putting these the ends of my floor, I can go into this layer and change the opacity so that I can make it nearly transparent and see where I'm putting the handles. And so because I've hit enter, it's done that thing that I don't want to happen, which is this. Makes it harder to manipulate. So I'm going to hit Command Z and go back a couple times, and then just whip over there really quick. And this can be kind of time consuming. I'm going to zoom out. And again, I would spend lots of time just doing this really slowly and being careful so that you don't have to go back and keep doing it over and over again. All right, I'm just going to guess and hit this return for now. Just, again, time is of the essence. And then to make these people look like they're standing on the floor and to make the walls look like they're on top of the floor, I'm going to go back and change the opacity again so that I can see where I'm cutting. And then I use that tool we've already used before, the polygonal lasso tool. And now I can zoom in before I get started. Polygonal lasso tool. And then just I'm cutting out pieces of my floor to reveal pieces of the building. And you can get perfect or not perfect with this thing right now. Got the little ants. And then I'm actually really practiced at this, so I can use the freehand lasso and just quickly draw around them. If I had the time, I would zoom really close in and make sure that this was all perfect, like I said. But just for demonstration purposes, we're just going to cut them out really quickly. And then check our work by looking at the opacity of that layer. And now, yes, you can see that the people are standing on the floor, and the building is sitting on top of the floor. So I have prepared that image already to show you what the final looks like. So to spare you guys from me cutting out all these people, this is what the final ended up looking like after I cut all the people out. If you look over here at my layers, because when the architect gave us this drawing, there was a bunch of people here, and I wanted to draw more attention to the floor, and this mock-up is more to show off my floor, to say the team or the judges or whoever you want to get excited about your design. So what I did was to get rid of the people, I ended up just cutting out a section of floor and putting it over the top of where the people were, so that when I bring my floor back up, I have this kind of, the floor is a little bit transparent, translucent, so that you could see, so it just doesn't look like a graphic design sitting on top. So if I had this translucent, you would have been able to see the people through it. That's why I added that area of floor. And then to cover these guys, one of the ways to do it would be to go back and draw over the people to redraw in the architect's drawing. But what I did just quickly was to make sure I was in the building layer using my polygon lasso, and I cut out a section of this window. And hit copy, created a new layer, pasted it into that layer, made sure the layer was above the floor, and then I moved it and used the free transform tools I was using and just covered the people up. Okay, so that's what I did to create that. Should I keep going, Barry? Or stop? Can't hear you.
Approaching the end, right?
What was that?
You're approaching the end of your presentation, right?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I was going to do is just show another way to use the selection tool, and then I'll be done.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so let's say you wanted to add another person into the floor. There's a couple ways to do it. Photoshop has this really quick way to select things now. This image of Barry, it's one layer, so Barry is on this white background. Let's say we wanted to extract him from that white background. There's a tool over here underneath the lasso tool called the object selection tool. It's in with the magic wands. So this is a new feature. The reason I'm showing you this is you'd probably be asking me, like, why are you going in there and individually cutting out every single, using the lasso tool to get in close and cut things out? You can just use this select tool and let go, and the little marching ants come up. But to me, I'm a perfectionist, and it doesn't really get it perfect every time. I want to show another example of that. When I cut us out, of this image using that selection tool. Just by dragging over me and releasing. Looks like it's selected pretty good, but then once you zoom in, you realize it didn't capture my hat. It turns into this whole thing. So the way that I end up cutting things out, I'm gonna hit Command deselect, D for deselect. I really go in, like if I was gonna do this for a graphic design project, I would go in with this polygonal lasso tool and literally clip it out like at this level so that I'm in control of what I'm clipping. So I double click, hit delete, and it should delete that. But what the reason that it didn't was because I don't know why this is there. Close. I need another layer. I need to unlock this. So if I hit delete now, it should delete what I just selected. And now this, when you see these gray checkerboard, that means that's transparent in the background. And if I was to use that technique to cut all around me and show the transparency, you can use other ways to cut, like use the eraser tool. You can get really like quick cutouts with the eraser tool. Let's just say I cut this whole thing out. I could select over him and then bring him into, I'm just kind of doing that thing where I've already got things set up. I would do what I did before to copy him and then paste him into another window like this. Make sure the background is either gone or that we have the transparency there. Drag it out, turn these guys off. And then using the move tool, simply drag Barry into the image and make sure that, see, his layer is actually behind this fake window layer. So I want to drag him above the fake window layer, and now he's in there. And you can use the selection tool to make him the right size, move them all around. And then just really quickly, I won't demonstrate it, but if you want him to look like he's in the space, create another layer, and then you can put that layer below him, and then using the paint bucket, you can create a little shadow below him. And then using the dodge and burn tools that I've brought up before, you can change the lighting on him to make him go with the lighting that's, I want to make sure I'm on Barry there. You can change the lighting on him using dodge and burn to make it look like he's in the space with the lighting that is in the space. If you ever get this little crosshair and you don't know why that's there, it's probably because your brush is too big. So you can move this down and then get a brush size that works. And then, you can add a shadow. So it's light on one side and dark on the other. All right, I'm just going to end it there abruptly because I know I was talking forever. So I release it back to you, Barry.
All right, there's a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Right. Hey, Barry, or excuse me, Bill, do you ever create artwork in Photoshop, and do you use a desktop or a laptop? And if both, you use one over the other for different stuff? Unmute yourself for me, would you?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Okay. I've used a laptop for the past probably 15 years because I do work all over the country, and my laptop on my backpack where I go. But using Photoshop for artwork, recently I have been using. Hey, Barry, could you mute yourself? I think we're getting some. Yeah. There we go. So I have started using Photoshop and using layers to mess around with paintings I'm doing. So I'll take a photo of my painting, just like I did where I showed you guys how I took a photo of it in the studio. I'll clip it out to proportion, and then what I've done is add a layer on top of that, and then add color to that layer, and then start cutting out areas of that top layer. It's just a new technique I'm using with my paintings. I'm not sure if I have an image I can show you really quick here. Maybe it's just even in here. So see how all these areas are cut out? I used the eraser tool on a layer to cut out the layers that I wanted. And then I projected that image onto my actual painting using a projector. And then I taped off all that area that I cut out with the layers like this. This is like using the eraser tool and erasing that top layer. So Photoshop is definitely having an effect on the way that I'm making art now.
Great. So you've actually used the Photoshop to work through an idea and then produce a painting after the fact.
Yeah, because sometimes, I put a lot of effort into the work and then get to a point where I'm about to do something really crazy to it. And, sometimes you want to take that risk and do something crazy to it and see what happens. And other times, just because I'm experimenting, I might want to experiment with color and stuff. And even with Photoshop, I can use some of the swatches and hit a color and it'll surprise me. Like when Facebook and stuff is, if you upload a painting to your post or to your wall as a post, it's adding these little bands of color. It's picking color on its own as a background. And sometimes those colors are really surprising to me. And I want to see what happens when I use those colors in a painting. So I'll put them in Photoshop. So it's just one more tool. I don't just use it only for painting. Sometimes I do it just to, the way that I work is like, let's see what happens when I try this. And it's just a quick, intuitive way to do it when I'm in Photoshop.
Great. Well, we've got lots of thank yous and nice presentations. That's really about the extent of the questions. I'll let Barry remind everybody of the next upcoming one. And then thank you, Bill.
Yes, thanks to everyone for joining us today. We always welcome feedback and suggestions for other workshops. The email that you received, the login information, is my work email, so you can just reply to that if you have suggestions or want to give us feedback. And I hope you'll join us next Thursday, September 10th at 10 for a similar workshop, but this time it'll be about Illustrator.
Cool.
No other questions? Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And I'm pretty available if you have other questions and you want to come visit my studio or something like that, just hit me up with an email or give me a call or whatever. I'm available.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.